When Larissa told me that lions live with lions and mice with mice, I realized she was right, only she was mistaken about which of us was which. Until that moment, I genuinely believed I was doing well in life. 23 years old. Working at a sociological research company, living in a studio apartment in a new building. Yes, I grew up in orphanage number 17. Yes, I got into university through a special quota. But I did it all on my own, without anyone's help. I graduated with honors, found a job where they valued my mind, not my connections. I thought that was enough to be happy. I was at the construction forum in the Cosmos Congress Center for work. Our company was conducting a survey among participants about trust in developers. I stood by the booth with a tablet, smiling and asking questions. That's when Ethan approached me. Tall. Wearing an expensive suit. He didn't rush to answer my questions. First, he asked if I was tired and if I wanted some coffee. Later, I learned he was one of the forum speakers, talking about new technologies in construction. He spoke simply, without arrogance, even with a touch of self-deprecating humor. "You're taking down my answers so seriously," he said as I filled out the form. "What if I'm lying? Then the research results will be wrong, and my boss will fire me," I replied. He laughed. "Then I'll be honest, for the sake of your career." We talked for another half hour after the survey was done. He told me about his family business, a construction holding company that had been growing for 2 generations. I told him about my work, how fascinating it was to study people's opinions and find patterns in the chaos of responses. When the forum ended, he asked for my phone number. The next 6 months were the happiest of my life. Ethan turned out to be exactly as he seemed that first day, attentive, intelligent, with a great sense of humor. He remembered everything I told him, asked about my work, never tried to impress me with fancy restaurants or gifts. We met in simple cafes, strolled through parks, went to his friend's summer house. For the first time in my life, I felt wanted, not out of pity. In the orphanage, they'd always told me how smart I was and how well I studied, but there was always that shadow of sympathy for the orphan. At university, my classmates were polite but kept their distance. At work, they valued me, but that was professional, without any warmth. With Ethan, it was different. Once, when I caught a cold, he brought me medicine and stayed with me the whole evening, even though he had an important meeting. "You know," he told me one May evening, when we were sitting on a bench by the fountain near my house, "I want to introduce you to my parents." My heart skipped a beat. In 6 months, he had barely mentioned his family, brushing it off with general comments about busy parents and the family business. Now I understand, he'd been preparing for this, figuring out how to arrange it. "They're old-fashioned," he warned. "My mom is especially strict. But once they get to know you, they'll love you." A few days later, he called and invited me to a family lunch. I spent half the day looking for the right dress. I wanted to make a good impression. The house wasn't just big, it was enormous. A 3-story estate in a gated community where every mansion was a work of art. Ethan parked by the wrought iron gates, and I saw the manicured lawns that looked like something from a European movie. "Don't worry," he said as we climbed the steps to the main entrance. "Everything will be fine." Larissa met us in the hallway. A woman in her mid-50s, wearing an expensive suit, her hair perfectly styled. She looked me over from head to toe, her gaze lingering on my simple dress and modest heels, what I thought was my best outfit. "Ethan has told us so much about you," she said, extending her hand. "Tatiana, right?" "Just Tanya," I corrected. "Oh yes, Tanya. Come in, come in." Then came the dinner, 2 hours of what I remember as pure humiliation. Larissa spoke about different levels of upbringing, about how important it was to understand your own social circle. She suggested I take some excellent etiquette courses from a friend of hers. "You see, dear," she said, delicately bringing a piece of sea bass to her mouth, "my son can have fun with anyone he likes. He's young, he needs emotions. But marriage is for someone of the right level." Ethan's father, who had been silent most of the evening, suddenly looked up. Larissa, maybe you should remember where you were when I met you. I was from an educated family, she countered. I had manners and an education. And here, what is there? I sat there thinking I should stand up and leave, keep whatever dignity I had left, but I couldn't. I wanted to see how far this would go. I wanted to hear what Ethan would say. He defended me, but it was weak, without any real conviction. Mom, you're wrong. Tanya is a wonderful girl, smart and educated. Of course, Larissa agreed. I'm not arguing. But education alone isn't enough, dear. After dinner, as we drove to my place, Ethan apologized. She's just like that. She's used to being in control. She'll get over it. Get over it. What a perfect choice of words, as if this was just a mood swing, not an outright humiliation. A week after that dinner, things started changing at work. At first, little things. I was removed from a real estate market research project. My boss, Anna, explained it as restructuring and avoiding a conflict of interest. You see, Tanya, she said without meeting my eyes, we have new partners in the construction sector. It's better to be safe. Later, I found out those partners were part of Ethan's family's holding company. Coincidence? Hardly. Suddenly, my colleagues started keeping their distance. In the smoking area, where I sometimes went for company, conversation stopped when I arrived. Someone had clearly planted a story that I was sticking my nose where it didn't belong, trying to use personal connections. And then something happened that made everything clear. On the evening of June 4th, scrolling through social media, I came across a story posted by a well-known society woman, the wife of a government official. A private event, a birthday for some important figure from City Hall. Expensive gowns, champagne, talk of politics and business. And suddenly, Ethan appeared in the frame. Next to him, a blonde in her mid-20s, wearing an evening gown. They were dancing slowly, laughing at something they said to each other. She was beautiful, polished, clearly from the right circle. In the next clip, Larissa applauded them with a satisfied smile and said, "Such harmony. Ethan has finally found his other half." The comments under the post were full of excitement. What a beautiful couple. When's the wedding? Ethan deserves only the best. I rewatched that video at least 10 times, noticing new details each time, how natural they looked together, how approvingly his mother nodded, how the girl, Elizabeth, according to a photo caption, knew everyone there, easily joining conversations, perfectly at ease. The next day, Ethan came to my place with a bouquet of roses. I set them aside and showed him the videos. Tanya, it's not what you think, he began defensively. I was invited. I didn't know my mom was organizing it. I didn't think it would look like that. Would you have taken me there? I asked calmly. He went silent. That silence was enough of an answer. Elizabeth, she's the daughter of our partners, he continued. My mom's known her since she was a kid. Our families are close. It doesn't mean anything. But you danced with her. You danced well. Out of politeness. Just politeness, Tanya. He kept trying to explain, to justify himself, but I could see he didn't even fully understand how it had all happened. The event was a family gathering, the kind where only their own were invited. Of course, he couldn't take me there, I wouldn't have fit in. Of course, he danced with Elizabeth, that's what was expected in their circle. He left empty-handed when he realized I was no longer listening to a word he said. 15 minutes later, a text from Larissa came through. She already had my number. Lions live with lions, and mice with mice. A lion and a mouse are only together in fairy tales. But you're a grown girl, you don't believe in fairy tales. I saved that message in my notes. I didn't even know why. Maybe I just wanted to remember her words exactly as she wrote them. Lions and mice. Well, we'd see. Ethan didn't give up. After that night, the video, and his mother's cutting message, he called every day. Texted. Showed up at my place. I pushed him away, but there was a new persistence in him I hadn't seen before. A week later, an email from Larissa arrived. This time it was formal, sent directly to my inbox. Tatiana, we don't have to like each other, but it seems you're not just a passing chapter in my son's life. In that case, it would be wise for you to better understand the world you want to become a part of. I invite you to the annual Investors and Developers Meeting. June 21st. Hyatt Hotel. 7 p.m. It will be useful. I showed the email to Ethan. He looked just as shocked as I was. This is a closed event, he said. They only invite people on the list, major investors, developers, insurers. I think she might actually be starting to like you. The event was indeed high level. More than 100 people who shaped the country's construction industry. I spent half my salary on a sharp, elegant suit, booked an appointment with a good hairstylist, and reread everything I could find about construction and development trends. On the evening of June 21st, Ethan and I climbed the steps of the Hyatt. The lobby was full of people in tailored suits, women in evening gowns, conversations about projects, investments, and city administration incentives. I stayed close to Ethan, smiling, trying to look confident, though inside I was wound tight with nerves. At our table sat exactly the kind of people Ethan had warned me about: the deputy mayor for urban planning, the head of the largest development company, a senior analyst from a bank that financed half the city's new builds. I was introduced simply as Ethan's guest, which basically meant you can ignore her. The first part of the evening went smoothly: dinner, polite small talk, speeches from distinguished guests. A former construction minister spoke about the importance of public-private partnerships. The deputy head of the investment fund discussed promising projects. An economics professor analyzed the effect of mortgage programs on the housing market. Larissa was hosting the event. Between speakers, she threw in short commentaries, general remarks about the new generation of professionals and women in the industry. I even started to relax, thinking everything would pass without incident. And then she announced. And now, a surprise guest. Tatiana Smith, with a presentation on modern trends in consumer demand. The room went silent. Then came restrained chuckles. A few polite claps. Several people pulled out their phones. My name, my last name, but what presentation? No one had told me anything. I felt my face heat up, my pulse quicken. I looked at Ethan. He was staring with his mouth slightly open, clearly just as confused. Larissa smiled, that same fake smile I remembered from our first dinner. It was a trap. A calculated, public trap to humiliate me in front of 100 influential people, to prove I couldn't handle even a simple request to speak, to show I didn't belong in their world. But something in me shifted at that moment. Maybe it was stubbornness, genetic or otherwise. Maybe it was a month's worth of pent-up anger finally breaking loose. I stood up and walked to the microphone. Good evening, I said, keeping my voice steady. My name is Tatiana, and I do have something to say about what your buyers are afraid of. I spoke about what I knew best, our research findings from the last 2 years. How people choose homes, what scares them, what they're willing to spend money on, and where they cut corners. I pulled up 2 charts from my phone and connected it to the projector, something I'd done many times at work. The main fears buyers have are unstable developers, fraud with square footage, inflated price per square meter, poor quality materials, and delayed delivery dates. I gave numbers, percentages, named specific districts in the city where people were reluctant to buy, and why. I started noticing that some people had stopped eating at their tables. Some set their phones down and turned toward me. A serious-looking man at the front table pulled out a notebook and began jotting things down. At some point, I realized I was telling them exactly what they needed to hear, not vague talk about trends, but concrete insight into real people who were buying their apartments. When I finished, the room broke into applause. And it didn't feel polite, it felt real. I walked back to the table, my knees shaky, but I tried to keep my composure. Larissa was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read: anger, surprise, maybe something else. Ethan finally snapped out of it. Tanya, where did you even get all that? From work, I said. I told you what I do. I picked up my bag and headed for the exit. I needed to be alone, to process what had just happened. Ethan stood up to follow me, but I waved him off. Don't. I need to think. At the door, two men in expensive suits stopped me. One introduced himself as the manager of a large marketing agency. The other, a representative of the Builders Business Association. Impressive presentation, the first one said, handing me a business card. We happen to have an opening for a head of research. If you're interested, give me a call. And we're looking for a PR consultant, the second added. Someone who understands how everyday people think. I took their cards, thanked them, and stepped outside. Ethan caught up to me there. He was animated, insisting he hadn't known about his mother's plan, that he'd been just as shocked as I was. Tanya, you were amazing, he kept repeating. You showed them all. I didn't even know you had that in you. You're a good man, Ethan, I said, stopping near the car. But you're weak. And your mother is stronger than you, which means you'll always be an extension of her. No, he protested. I want to be with you. Not because you're beautiful or easy, but because you're my anchor. Tonight made me realize that. I didn't answer. I just drove home through the sleeping city, turning the night's events over in my mind. The next day, I met with the manager from the marketing agency. The office was in a sleek business center with floor-to-ceiling windows and a young, dynamic team. They showed me a presentation for a new project, a consumer preferences study for a chain of shopping centers. We're looking for a head of public relations, the director explained. Someone who can speak to people in their language, and to business in the language of numbers and facts. After your speech last night, we knew you were exactly what we need. The salary was 6 times higher than what I was making, plus project bonuses, a flexible schedule, and the chance to work with major clients. I asked for a couple of days to think it over. That evening, I told Ethan about it over the phone. He was genuinely happy for me, but I could hear the tension in his voice. Mom says I have to make a choice, he told me. Either you're out of my life, or I leave the family and the business. For good. Larissa had scheduled one final family dinner for the next day. That was when the decision would be made. The next day, I spent a long time deciding what to wear. I wanted to look dignified but not flashy. I chose a turquoise dress, simple but elegant. Ethan and I arrived at his house together. At the table sat only Larissa and an older aunt from the family, a silent woman with a tight smile. His father was still away on a business trip. Larissa got straight to the point. Tonight, we settle this once and for all. Ethan, either you come back to the family and drop this nonsense, or you go to her and give up everything we've given you. She began to list it off. Trust funds, bank accounts, your share in the holding company, property in Switzerland and Montenegro, the cars, the connections, the family's reputation. Ethan started to respond, but I spoke first. Larissa, I didn't come here to beg for your approval or your blessing. I'm not the little gray mouse you think I am. I have a job offer, a very good one. Now I'm my own asset. Ethan added, I have assets, my own contacts, my brain, and the drive to work. Tanya and I will be fine. Larissa's face went pale. She clearly hadn't expected that we wouldn't plead, but would simply state our decision. At that moment, the front door slammed. Ethan's father walked in, a fit, silver-haired man, looking surprised to find us all there. What's going on? He asked, taking off his coat. Larissa quickly told the story from her perspective, the defiant son choosing some girl over his family and future. Ethan told his version. His father listened, then gave his wife a heavy look. Larissa, for 25 years I've listened to you divide people into breeds. But have you forgotten who you were when I met you? I came from a family with status, and you were the daughter of a provincial schoolteacher, poor as a church mouse, you could say. But I didn't humiliate you. I helped you become who you are today. Somewhere along the way, you forgot where you came from. Larissa shot up from the table, her face flushed with anger. But her father-in-law continued calmly. If you don't stop, I'll freeze the accounts in your name. I won't stand by and watch you trample people anymore. This young woman has proven with her work and intelligence that she's worthy of our family name. He turned to me and added, I saw your speech at the Hyatt. It was improvised, you were nervous, but overall, very, very good. Well done. Larissa left the dining room, slamming the door. Ethan's father raised his glass. Well, then, let's drink to happiness and understanding in the family. We laughed, for the first time that evening. The wedding preparations started just a month later. I still couldn't believe how drastically things had changed. After her husband's reprimand, Larissa had to accept the inevitable. She didn't turn into a warm, loving mother-in-law, miracles don't happen, but at least she stopped openly fighting me. In her husband's presence, she behaved with exaggerated politeness, even took part in discussing wedding details. But I saw her lips tighten when we talked about inviting my colleagues, and the strained smile when she introduced me to her acquaintances. Don't take it personally, Ethan's father told me during one of those meetings. Larissa has built her status her entire life. It's hard for her to admit she was wrong, but she'll get used to it. Then he made me an offer I couldn't refuse. Tanya, I can't let a talent like you go to a competitor, he said with a smile. We have a new opening in the holding company, Director of Public Relations. You'd manage the company's image, work with clients, and analyze their needs. That's exactly what you do best. The salary was twice what the marketing agency had offered, plus benefits, a company car, and the chance to shape the company's customer policy. Just don't think this is nepotism, he added seriously. After your forum speech, 3 of our partners asked me if I could introduce them to that smart young woman who understands buyers so well. The job turned out to be exactly what I'd been dreaming of, without even knowing it. I analyzed client needs, developed loyalty programs, advised architects on floor plans that people actually wanted. For the first time, I felt my work wasn't just about making money, it was making people's lives better. Ethan changed too. The threat of losing his financial safety net lit a fire under him. He started focusing on his own projects, studying new construction technologies, and building relationships with young architects and engineers. You know, he told me one evening as we sat in the kitchen of our new apartment, I never thought I'd be grateful to my mom for her toughness, but she forced me to grow up. The wedding was exactly what we wanted, not too extravagant, but beautiful and warm. My former colleagues from the research company came, along with Ethan's friends and his father's business partners. Larissa behaved herself. She even gave a speech about the importance of understanding and support in a family. Only I noticed her hands trembling as she lifted her glass. After the ceremony, when we'd signed the register and I officially took Ethan's last name, his father came up to me and quietly said, "Now you have not just a new name, but a new family. And know this, you've earned it." 6 months later, I realized Larissa was beginning to change. Slowly, reluctantly, but still changing. She started asking my opinion on the family's charity projects. She wanted to know how best to present their support for orphanages so it wouldn't look like empty PR. "You're good at talking to people," she admitted once. "Maybe you're right, and I've spent too long thinking only about status. We'll never be close friends." Too much was said. Too many wounds were inflicted. But we've learned to respect each other, and for a family, that's enough. And when I think about the journey from that uncertain girl in the orphanage to the PR director of a major holding company, I realize Larissa was right about lions and mice. She just forgot one thing: mice sometimes grow up.